Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Sam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpachubhischa Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namah Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's February 5th, 2025. And this is online at the Bhakti Center. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 83, Text 17 through 19. Okay. Sri Lakshmana Uvacha Manapi Ragni Achyuta Janma Karma Shrutva Muhur Nadada Gitam Asaha Chitam Mukunde Kila Padmahastaya Rita Susam Rishya Vahaya Lokapan. Sri Lakshmana said, so again, this is Lakshmana is one of Krishna's principal 8 queens, and she's speaking to Draupadi. She, along with the other queens, are speaking to Draupadi. This is on the field of Kurukshetra during the solar eclipse, and they're each telling Draupadi how they married Krishna. So Sri Lakshmana said, "O Queen, I repeatedly heard Narada Muni glorify the appearance and activities of Achyuta, and thus my heart also became attached to the Lord Mukunda. Indeed, even goddess Padmahasta chose him as her husband after careful consideration, rejecting the great demigods who rule various planets." So Padma means lotus, Hasta means hand, and this is referring to the churning of the ocean of milk, where the goddess of fortune came out of the ocean of milk and checked out everybody as to who she wanted to marry, and then she chose the Lord. Okay, so there's no BBT commentary. It's a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who writes, Lakshmana said, "My heart became asaha, attached to Mukunda. Therefore I, who carry a lotus in my hand, chose Mukunda after rejecting various planetary rulers." So that's interesting commentary because it's referring to Lakshmana as the goddess of fortune rather than talking about another goddess of fortune. So that's interesting. And then we have Srila Sanatan Goswami's commentary. He writes, Lakshmana then spoke. She thought that the other queens spoke the stories of their good fortune very briefly because of shyness, though the events were full of the highest bliss. She then thought that perhaps Draupadi's and her own wedding were most attractive. Being proud of these 2 weddings, taking advantage after the senior 7 queens, she began speaking of her own wedding in detail without restraint. And then he's saying what she was saying. From Devaki, I heard of the birth of Krishna, full of all powers, Achyutasya, and heard of his activities in Gokula, and his form and qualities as well. Bhadra became attracted to him because of knowing of his birth, since he was close as a cousin. How did you hear about him? Somebody might ask. So somebody might say this to her. And she would reply, I heard constantly about him through Narada and became constantly attracted to him. The word ha indicates joy. Quote, this is someone else, again, who might be talking to Lakshmana, but it is not proper to be attracted to someone who has many other lovers, unquote. On considering this, she says that he alone was her goal. Lakshmi, holding the lotus, having many attractive gestures. On considering carefully, Su and Sam indicate her ability to do so, rejected Brahma, Shiva, and others completely without even looking at them, and chose Mukunda at the time of churning the milk ocean. I became attracted to him alone with similar consideration, or my heart was attracted to Mukunda. fixed on him alone after careful consideration, with the lotus in my hand, giving up all other kings, I chose him. This is also suggested by taking the second part of verse as the actions of Lakshmi. She speaks the pastime in brief in this verse and then gives detailed in the following verses. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says that this Padmahastaya refers to Lakshmana herself. Srila Sanatana Goswami says it can refer to Lakshmana herself or to Lakshmi Devi, and the way that BBT translators have chosen to translate it as referring to Lakshmi. Okay, going on to text 18. Gnatva mama matam sadvi pita durita vatsalaha brihasena iti kyatas tatropayam achikarat. My father, Brihatsena, was by nature compassionate to his daughter, and knowing how I felt, O saintly lady, he arranged to fulfill my desire. So we're going to look again at Srila Sanatana Goswami, who says, Mata means her desire. O chaste lady, in other words, speaking to Draupadi, you would also have such desires, just as your father was affectionate to you because you were chaste, so my father was affectionate to me. Thus he arranged to fulfill my desire. One kind of side point to mention is we have sometimes discussions in our Hare Krishna movement about how to address each other, what kind of honorifics to use. So instead of just saying someone's name, so instead of just saying, oh, Yamuna, or, oh, Govinda, or whatever, that what we add to the name. Now, if we look at the Bhagavatam, we'll find that there's all different kinds of honorifics used. Here we have the word Sadvi. So Lakshmana is speaking to Draupadi, and she calls her Sadvi, O saintly lady. And there's many, many, many dozens of ways in which men talk to women, and women talk to women, and women talk to men in the Bhagavatam. Okay, there's no commentary by Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur on that verse. Going on to text 19. Yata swayam vare rajni matsya parteshaya kutaha ayam tu bahirachano drisyate sa jale param. Just as a fish was used as a target in your Swayamvara ceremony, O queen, to assure that you would obtain Arjuna as your husband, so a fish was also used in my ceremony. In my case, however, it was concealed on all sides, and only its reflection could be seen in a pot of water below. So here you'll notice that Lakshmana says to Draupadi, Rajni. So she called her Sadvi and she called her Rajni. Okay, BBT purport. Arjuna is famous as the most expert bowman. Why then could he not hit the fish target at Srimati Lakshmana's Swayamvara ceremony, just as he had done once before to win Draupadi? Srila Sridhar Swami explains, the target at Draupadi's Swayamvara had been covered only partially, so that a marksman could see it if he looked straight up at the pillar on which it was placed. To shoot Lakshmana's target, however, it was necessary to aim by looking up and down at the same time, an impossible feat for any mortal. Therefore, only Krishna could strike the target. So, looking at Srila Sanatana Goswami's commentary on this verse, he writes, she describes the method as Yata, your father arranged for the test, so my father arranged in a similar way. But there was a great difference. The fish ayam was placed along with the bow and arrow so that it was very difficult to pierce. Or what was arranged by my father, ayam, was difficult to detect, visible on top of a pillar above the water. This was arranged by my father. The fish could be seen in the water and not outside. And we're going to look at a commentary of Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur on text 19. Lakshmana said, a fish was also arranged for your Draupadi Swayamvara, wherein you had the desire of obtaining Arjuna. Parte Paisaya Arjuna Pratichaya. In some editions of Bhagavatam, the word Parte Prashnaya is replaced by Partesh Apakrita, which means struck by the arrows of Arjuna. But one may ask, why couldn't Arjuna pierce the fish in Lakshmana's case? Lakshmana answers saying, in my case, the fish, which was moving very quickly, could only be seen by looking at its reflection in a pot of water placed at the bottom of a pillar. It could not be seen by looking up. To shoot my target, it was necessary to aim by looking up and down at the same time, an impossible feat for any mortal. Therefore, only Krishna could strike the target. But the fish arranged by your father, though covered, could be aimed at by looking straight up the pillar and thus be pierced by the expert marksman Arjuna. So we're going to have another just little side comment here that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentions that in some editions of the Bhagavatam, so let's look at what we have here. We have, I don't know if you can see my cursor here. We have this word. Okay. Parteshaya. Partha Ipshaya, with the desire of attaining Arjuna. And he says in some editions, the word is Parteshaya is replaced by Partesh Apakritaha, which means struck by the arrows of Arjuna. So it's very important that our acharyas note whenever there's different editions of the Bhagavatam. And again, this is a side note, it's not the main thing I want to talk about. Two side notes. One, the plethora of ways in which men and women address each other in the Bhagavatam. But the other is, how do we know whether or not the Bhagavatam is a bona fide scripture? We justifiably criticize some of the scriptures of the world that they have been changed and that we don't really know what the original scripture said. So that while in someone's scripture, it might say, the Lord said, maybe somebody just made that up after some time. Maybe it's not the original. And in fact, in the Vedic canon, this problem exists for most of the Vedic literature. So of the 18 Puranas, all the Itihasas, actually, we don't know whether or not those are the originals. But we do know for the Bhagavatam. The reason we know for the Bhagavatam is that there's over 81 commentaries. Now, keep in mind that these scriptures were originally written on leaves, right? You have some of the religions of the world, they write on parchment, which is a kind of animal skin, which lasts a little longer than leaves. But in any case, these scriptures had to be copied over and over again by scribes. Until 1440, there wasn't a printing press. And it's only recently, I mean, when I was a kid, there were like mimeograph machines. So to copy it over, you're copying it over by hand. That was a career in those days. It was a rabbinical career because you had to be very honest. And so you copied it over, but sometimes things were inadvertently introduced. And so you have variant editions. There's variations in verses. And our acharyas will point this out. Srila Prabhupada will often point this out. Sometimes there's variant whole verses. Sometimes Prabhupada will say, in some editions of the Bhagavatam, these two verses are added, or in some editions, this verse doesn't appear. Now, because we have all these commentaries going back thousands of years, and because they rewrite the verse and then comment on it, we're able to see that these are the same verses over thousands of years. Please keep in mind that such is not the case for all of the literature in the Vedic canon. Therefore, if you go to like one of the Puranas, one of the Itihasas, and you're going to quote from there, you may not be quoting an original verse. So how do we know what verses we can accept from these other literatures? We go by what is referred to by our acharyas. So if our acharyas are quoting a verse, this is a verse from the Padma Purana, this is a verse from the Garuda Purana, we accept the verse that they are quoting. We don't necessarily accept all the other verses because they may have been changed. So this is something very important to keep in mind, because as more and more of these literatures are getting translated into English, we may think, oh, they're all equally reliable. And that's not the case. All right, so again, that wasn't really what I wanted to talk about today, but just a little side note. So I wanted to talk about the fact that these queens are reveling in, thinking about, and discussing the first time, basically, that they met Krishna, how they married Krishna. Now, it's explained that at least for these 8 principal queens, they're eternal consorts of the Lord. They're always married to Krishna, without any beginning, without any end. The 16,100, that's not necessarily true of them. Some of these sadhana, siddha devotees, And Srila Rupa Goswami explains that if we want to be the consort of the Lord as a wife, so some want to be the consort of the Lord as a girlfriend in Vrindavan, and others want to be the consort of the Lord as a wife, that one may become one of the wives of Krishna. But even then, that is a reawakening of one's eternal relationship. That is a redemption. If you think of it in this world, if a person is, let's say a couple's married and one of them leaves or has an affair, but then comes back and restores the relationship. So we rebellious souls are in that situation where we have an eternal relationship with Krishna, but for whatever reason, whatever the history, however, Prabhupada says that's not a very important thing to discuss. However, it happens somehow, we know it's our responsibility, but the details, the relationship was broken and now we're restoring it. So that's another kind of first. So even though these relationships are eternal, there's still a kind of first. There's still a kind of beginning. I was an editor for Back to Godhead for 30 years, and absolutely our most popular articles were what we call the How I Came articles, where people would talk about how they took up Krishna consciousness. And such is even the case for someone whose, parents and grandparents are devotees, because even those people, at a certain point, they make a decision. This is what I want to do. I want to worship Krishna. So those are the most popular articles. And in the world in general, a very popular trope is what we call the redemption story. A person who, was criminal or fallen or an addict or some sort of difficult, sort of moral difficulty, and they redeem themselves. They restore themselves to a position of physical, moral, relationship health. So there's a very, very popular kind of trope or explanation of story. So we're going to look at, keep time, put this over here. So we're going to look at the eternal, quote unquote, first meetings, and we're going to look at some redemption stories. And then we're going to look at the fact that there's kind of this also separation meeting, even after the first meeting. So in order to look at this first meeting and re-meeting, we would turn to Srila Rupa Goswami in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in the third main part of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the Western Ocean. He talks about what's called Staibhav. Staibhav is the basic relationship we have with the Lord. So any of you who've been around the Krishna consciousness movement for a little while, I'm sure you've heard of that. There's 5 basic relationships: neutrality, servitorship, friendship, parental, and romantic relationship. And these are referred to in the science of rasa as one's staibhav. Stai means to stay. It's actually related to the word stay or stable. Prabhupada translates it as continuous ecstasy. So it's the basic relationship that we have with Krishna. And Srila Rupa Goswami describes all the components of each of these 5 main staibhavs. And at the end of each of the descriptions, he describes separation and meeting and the varieties of separation and meeting in each of these relationships. And for each of these 5 primary relationships, he describes a first meeting. So there's just like this sense of a beginningless separation, and then there's a first meeting. So this is what Lakshmana is describing. When she's first meeting Krishna, she heard about Krishna from Narada. Her father sets up this fish thing. And so here Krishna comes and he's able to look up and down at the same time. I don't know how he does that, but he can do that. Obviously, he can look everywhere at the same time. And he pierces the fish and wins her. In this particular story of Lakshmana, it's interesting that our acharyas state that she was thinking how the other queens had only spoken briefly, but that she really wanted to get into her story. And that's particularly interesting because earlier in the Bhagavatam, when it was described how Krishna married these queens, which I think is around chapter 59 or so, Lakshmana's was described very briefly. So like Rukmini's was described in great depth, Satyabhama's was described in great depth, Jambavati's in great depth, the others a little bit less so, Bhadra and Sattva. But Lakshmana was very, very brief. And in this section of the Bhagavatam, where the queens are talking to Draupadi at Kurukshetra during the eclipse, the other queen stories are described briefly, and Lakshmana is described extensively. In fact, when Lakshmana was described earlier, it wasn't clear at all that there was this fish competition. Okay, so let's think about this kind of first meeting, even of these eternal associates. So there is Akura. Akura was in the relationship of a servant, although he is Krishna's uncle, and you could say that he has a parental type relationship. His mood was that of Dasya, not of Vatsalya, although technically he's in that relationship of uncle. And Akura had chosen to stay in Mathura and serve Kamsa after Kamsa imprisoned his father. And many of he had a coup, Kamsa had a coup, and he took over the government. He imprisoned his father and he was ruling the kingdom. And many of the people who were in the government, they left and they hid because they didn't want to get imprisoned or killed or whatever. But Akura, who was part of the government, he stayed and served Kamsa. And he stayed for many reasons, but the main reason was so he could participate in Krishna's pastimes. So Krishna was taken to Vrindavan. Akura didn't see Krishna at Krishna's appearance. And it was only when Kamsa sent Akura to Vrindavan to get Krishna that Akura saw Krishna. And as Akura is going to Vrindavan, he's meditating on Krishna. He's meditating how he's going to see Krishna, on how Krishna is going to recognize him. Krishna is going to be pleased with him. And one of my favorite things in Prabhupada's books is where Prabhupada said that if we're not working to be recognized by Krishna, our whole life is condemned. That we should try to act in such a way that Krishna says, well done, good and faithful servant, that Krishna recognizes this. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would say, don't try to see God, act in such a way that God wants to see you. That you get like called into the office, not because you're in trouble, but because you're being recognized. So the Akura is just meditating on Krishna and Balaram, how he's going to see them, how the Lord's going to recognize him, and how the Lord will say, I'm Akura, and he sees the Lord's. Somebody needs to mute. There's someone whose thing is making noise. I don't know if the host can do that. And then he sees the footprints of the Lord and he just falls down and he's in such ecstasy that I'm going to see Krishna for the first time. Although again, ostensibly, he's an eternal servant and he's always been with Krishna, but they're having this Leela of meeting for the first time. Another example in Dasya, and this is another category of Dasya, another category of servantership that's more intimate, is Krishna's children and his nephews and nieces and his younger siblings. Also his children-in-law once his children get married. So with children, children-in-law, grandchildren, nephews, nieces, younger siblings, etc. And there were a lot of those because his father had many wives. So he had a lot of half siblings through his father. And one example given by Srila Rupa Goswami is of Krishna's first child, Pradyumna, by his queen Rukmini, that when Pradyumna was a baby, he was kidnapped. And he grew up out of the home. He didn't come back until he was an adult. So he saw his parents. I mean, of course, he saw his mother right after he was born, but that doesn't really so much count. But he saw his parents for the first time, ostensibly, as an adult. And how Pradyumna felt, when he and his wife come to Dwarka and see Krishna for the first time. I'm finally seeing my father. I'm finally seeing my father. Right? I was kidnapped at birth. We have stories like that in this world, children who were kidnapped from a hospital or something, and later they find out they were kidnapped and they search out their birth parents, and then they finally, and this is a very heart-moving story in this world, right? When children meet their birth parents for the first time. Imagine if your parent is Krishna, how you would feel. And then we have the friends of Krishna. So the friends of Krishna, we have the examples given of Arjuna. So Arjuna was born in the forest when his father and mother were living there, a long, long story. And it was only after his father's passing away that he came to Hastinapur. And his first meeting with Krishna, as described by Sri Rupa Goswami, is in the city of Drupad. So when the Pandavas, when they were hiding, disguised as Brahmanas, and then they went to win the hand of Draupadi, they came to Drupad's city to go to Draupadi's Swayamvar, and Krishna was also there. And Sri Rupa Goswami says that Arjuna saw Krishna for the first time at a potter's shop. So somehow Arjuna, when he's in Drupad's town shopping, uh, imagine that. Imagine that you're out shopping at Walmart or something, you know. There's Krishna also shopping. And then how Arjuna felt seeing Krishna for the first time. The example given of the romantic relationship is a very interesting example. It's that of Vasudev's wives. So Vasudev had, I think, 16 wives. Now, some of his wives actually were in Vrindavan hiding from Kamsa. Like we know that Rohini was there, but some of her co-wives were also there, and they got to see Krishna and Balaram grow up. But at least some of Vasudev's wives were not there. They were in Mathura. So they saw Krishna for the first time when Krishna came to kill Kamsa. And you know, that's in Vatsalya Bhav. So in parental affection, they're seeing Krishna for the first time there when Krishna comes to kill Kamsa. Oh, here's my son. Of course, would be their stepson. But here's my son. Here's my beloved son. Now, it's not mentioned by Sri Rupa Goswami, but there would be something similar with Sandipani Muni when he first sees Krishna, when Krishna comes to be his student. In the romantic relationship, we have these examples of all of these queens, right? Where they're hearing about Krishna, they're hearing about Krishna from Narada. Rukmini also, she heard about Krishna when she actually sees him for the first time. We have a similar thing happening in the Ramayana with Ram and Sita, where when Ram and Lakshman come to Mithila, and it's explained in the Ramayana how when Sita and Ram see each other for the first time. So this is the great pleasure of the Lord. And all of these pastimes are eternal, right? You could say, well, Krishna's always married to these in these relationships. He always has this father and mother. He always has these friends. He always has these servants. But how wonderful is that first meeting? Right? And we enjoy that in this world. The first time we meet somebody with whom we end up in a lifetime relationship in some capacity. And this is going on eternally. Eternally, they're having this kind of first meeting. So eternally, they're always together, and eternally, they're having this first meeting. And also, there's meeting and separation going on all the time. So it's part of how this staibhav, this basic relationship, is intensified and has varieties of flavors, that there's always some kind of meeting and separation. Sometimes it's because, Krishna's in the village with his parents, then he goes in the forest where he's with his friends, and then he's not with his parents, and then he goes back to the village where he's just with the parents, and then in the middle of the night, he's just with the gopis, he's not with his friends. So there's this constant coming and going, right? It says that Krishna goes to the forest because the forest creatures, the trees, the deer, the squirrels, they're feeling separation when he's in the village, right? At night, when Krishna's dancing with the gopis, he's not with the cows. There's some pastimes where he's with everybody simultaneously. The only two I'm aware of is Govardhan Lila, when Krishna lifts Govardhan Hill, and then everybody from the village and the forest, everyone is there. And when Krishna leaves for Mathura, one where most are there is when Krishna's dancing on Kaliya, but not everybody is there. For example, Rohini is not there. And there's a whole backstory as to why Rohini is not there. But in any case, Krishna is always coming and going. He's always coming and going in Vrindavan, in Mathura, in Dwarka. And Srila Rupa Goswami describes extensively these different kinds of meeting again after separation. And because Krishna is ever fresh, when you meet him after separation, you almost feel like you're meeting him for the first time. Our acharyas described how Srimati Radharani will see Krishna and she'll think, who is this beautiful young man who I've never seen before, even though she has seen him so many times. So this is true, this meeting and separation and this concept of first meeting is very much true for Krishna's eternal associates who have never fallen into illusion. But we can also think of the first meeting, the ostensibly, again, first meeting for the sadhaka, for people like myself who are fallen conditioned souls, and where our first meeting with Krishna is a redemption. We think about, say, Dhruva Maharaj, where his motive for worshiping the Lord was power and vengeance, power, control, and vengeance. And when he first sees the Lord, he's just, oh, what I wanted was broken glass, and what I got was a diamond. He's just overwhelmed, right? And he's redeemed from all of his lower qualities. Right? There are examples, some examples given by Srila Rupa Goswami is that of Bilvamangala Thakur seeing Krishna in Vrindavan. So Bilvamangala Thakur was, as described by Srila Rupa Goswami, was an impersonalist. And then he came to Vrindavan, and he also had all kinds of difficulties. He was very attached. He was so attached to his girlfriend that he left his father's funeral early in a great storm and crossed the river hanging on to what he thought was a log, ended up to be a corpse, climbed up to her window on what we thought was a rope, ended up to be a snake. And he was so attached to this girlfriend of his. And then she said, you should be this attached to the Lord as you are to having your relationship with my body. And he left her and he decided to go to Vrindavan. He was still had a real problem with lusting after women. And he ended up taking out his eyes, blinding his eyes so that he wouldn't be seeing women anymore. But then in Vrindavan, he actually saw Krishna. And he saw Krishna again for the first time. And this wonderful, it was his redemption, his full redemption. So this is what we are looking forward to as sadhana siddhas, is this vision of the Lord when we see him for the first time and we are cleansed. Like Dhruva Maharaj, he's touched by the conch shell of the Lord and he's cleansed of all of his material contamination. So this is the celebration that goes on, but even this light is too bright. Even after our seeing the Lord, again, there's this constant lila of meeting separation, and even in our eternal form and our eternal pastimes, we will have ongoing this feeling of I'm seeing Krishna for the first time. I'm seeing Krishna for the first time. I'm seeing Krishna for the first time. That ever fresh. And so it's something that we'll want to talk about, just like Lakshmana wants to talk. I want to tell you about it. And it's something that Draupadi wants to hear, and the other queens are sharing their story and so forth. So questions, comments, additions, subtractions, corrections.
Jai, thank you. Urmila Devidasi, wonderful class. Okay, dear devotees, it's your turn to shine back. Please comment, reflect. There's not going to be corrections.
Oh, sometimes there's correction.
Okay. Yeah. Who wants to ask a question for the first time? You can experience that bhava, especially if you're introverted. Please.
Oh, the introverts they that's why we have group work. Introverts will say.
Yeah.
Yes, Bhakti Center.
Hare Krishna, Mother Urmila.
Hare Krishna.
I have one correction.
Oh, see?
No, I'm kidding. Our only correction we can think of is that you should be giving class more often. Thank you for inundating us with your divine intelligence and wonderful immersive style of retelling these pastimes. My question, out of curiosity, was what that detail about Rohini Devi was.
Oh. So then you have to look at other manifestations and incarnations. So you know that Balaramji is also a snake.
Mm.
Called Anantasesha. He is a snake. Now, the divine snakes in the universe take birth from Kadru. Kadru is one of Kasyapa's wives. Yes. And another one of her children is Kali. So Balaram knew that his mother, Rohini, also because she also exists as Kadru, that she wouldn't be very happy to see Krishna kicking and exhausting Kaliya. And therefore, Balaram told her, he said, when Krishna's finished, she never even got to the lake. When the devotees in the village were seeing the ill omens and they were going to follow the footprints, Balaram said, whenever this pastime is finished, people are going to be hungry. And my dear mother, would you cook so that when we come back from wherever we go to, that people will have something to eat? It's just like this is always the case, right? Like there's these people, all the people going to the festival, and then there's the people back in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's like the support staff. So, Rohini's in charge of the kitchen. I posted something about this on Facebook some time ago. People say Radharani's kitchen. No, it's not Radharani's kitchen. Technically, you could say it's Mother Yasoda's kitchen, but Mother Yasoda gives charge of the kitchen to Mother Rohini. Now, Srimati Radharani cooks there. Some people argued with me that in the afternoon, Radharani cooks at home. So then she's cooking in her kitchen. Although you could also argue that that's Jatila's kitchen. You can make some argument there. But the main meals, Srimati Radharani cooks at home to bring like snacks and stuff out into the forest for their nighttime pastimes. But the main meals are cooked in Nanda Maharish's house, and the kitchen is run by Rohini. So Mother Rohini runs the kitchen, and a lot of the gopis help cook. I mean, it's not just Srimati Radharani, but a lot of the gopis are helping to cook. Of course, Srimati Radharani is particularly invited by Mother Yasoda because Durvasa Muni gave her the benediction that whatever she cooked would be like nectar. So although generally a married woman doesn't go to someone else's house and cook for that man, because Mother Yasoda is the chief person in Vrindavan, she's the queen of Vrindavan. Therefore, her order is taken by Jatila very seriously. But anyway, yeah, Rohini's in charge of the kitchen. And so that's the backstory there. And that's why she's not there when Krishna's on Kaliya. And one would certainly surmise that Rohini's not cooking in the kitchen alone. She's cooking for a lot of people. So I'm sure she has a lot of assistants there as well who don't go and witness the Kaliya pastime.
Wow, that's so fascinating of how personal every aspect is. Like they're considering how she might feel about this whole pastime, so they're being very personal in their action.
Yeah, of course, Balaram, or I forget which one of our acharyas, but Balaram says when Krishna's dancing on Kaliya, he says, well, Krishna doesn't play like that with me in my form as Anantasesha. He's being so playful with Kaliya. Why isn't he that playful with me? So that's also what's going on.
Oh, that's good.
And it's also one of the many reasons why Balaram wasn't afraid. Everyone else was terrified and practically dying. And Balaram's like, Krishna with a snake, what's the problem with that? He's telling everyone, he's preventing them from going in the poisonous water, and he's reassuring them, and he's laughing.
I love that. It's interesting that he is aware sometimes, and then another pastime he was covered over.
Yes, that is also interesting.
Yeah.
You see, stories aren't fun if you always know how they're going to end. And not only if you always know how they're going to end, like there's a book I read about writing good fiction. Maybe someday I'll write a second novel. And so I was reading this book to prepare myself to write a second novel. And one of the, there's categories of characters. There's the good guys and the bad guys. And then there's the bad guy, the people who look like bad guys but are actually good. And the people who look like good guys but are actually bad. Yeah. And then people who change, they start off good and they become bad, and they start off bad and they become good. Now, when you're hearing or reading or watching these stories, you don't know all that in the beginning. Like you're thinking, oh, that's the bad guy. That's the good guy, but you're not always right about it. Oh my God, that bad guy's actually good, or that good guy's actually bad. And it's part of how the story unfolds. It's not just the very ending. Like, what do they call it? Spoilers when people tell you what's going to happen. So, spoilers isn't just the ending. The son dies and these people get married, and it's not just that. It's who's really the good guy and who's really the bad guy. That kind of gets revealed as the story goes on. Now, if you know all that in advance, you don't get as much pleasure out of the story. And the Lord doesn't just want to hear stories, he likes to be in stories. One of the reasons we like stories so much is that the Lord likes stories so much, and he actually is in the stories. That's what we mean by lila or krida. So it's also fun for him if he doesn't know. Now, sometimes, in some stories, some characters know and some don't. Like some characters might know, oh, that bad guy is actually good, or that good guy is actually bad. And some characters may not know. So we see, like with Pralambasura, Krishna knew and Balaram didn't. So you have this kind of, or Krishna obviously knew that he was expanded as all the boys and the calves after Balaram stole them, but Balaram didn't know. So because Krishna and Balaram are the same person, Krishna is simultaneously getting the enjoyment of knowing and not knowing.
Wow.
So that's also sometimes fun to actually know, right? Maybe, you're watching a movie with a friend and you've already seen the movie before, so you know what's going on, but your friend doesn't know, right? So you have some kind of pleasure that, I know that guy's really, I know that that's what's going on. But you're also kind of delighting in sitting next to your friend who doesn't know, oh, wow, he was really a bad guy after all. So Krishna and Balaram are having this relationship in their own leelas. And yeah, so sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know. That's their pleasure.
That sounds unlimitedly relishable.
It is. Well, it's also like this first meeting, like they're married eternally. But Krishna is like, oh, I'm just finding out about Lakshmana for the first time. I didn't know her before. I'm hearing about her character. Or what does she look like? Oh, look at her. And she comes out, she's going to be describing how she's lit in the following verses, how she's dressed, and like the bride comes out and the groom sees her for the first time. So Krishna has this is going on as if he doesn't know. Yeah.
I have a question on that too, but I think Krishna Kumari Devi has.
Okay. Somebody else with a question? Yes.
This is so relishable. I prefer you just to keep asking your questions. I would never want to interrupt. I have a couple of things I was thinking, like, greeting of the deities, or, Janmashtami. Like, there is this excitement, like, is Muralidhar going to have his cow herding rope today? Or, like that. But yeah, I had a question from yesterday or the other day, and maybe it's relevant here because I was thinking about Dwarka, but I was also thinking about Vrindavan. And I was just thinking about the personalities that are there now in Vrindavan, like, even the monkeys or the pigs or the Brijbasis, like, have they been taking birth there again and again there since the time Krishna was there?
Ooh, okay. Well, there's a whole lot of residents in Vrindavan, especially if you're going to count all the bugs and all the plants. You're talking about billions and billions who are living in the Boma Vrindavan, earthly Vrindavan. For some of them, according to the Brihad Bhagavatam, for some of them, that's their very first connection with spirituality. So some of them may have had no interest in spirituality, and Krishna arranged that they took birth in Vrindavan so that they get some automatic spiritual credits. Some of them may be taking birth there again and again because they're mistakenly attached to the false ego of being a resident of the earthly Vrindavan. I live in Vrindavan. I live in Radhakund. And they never actually enter into the deep parts of Vrindavan. They stay like on the outer layer because they have a false ego, of I live in Vrindavan and I perform a lot of austerities at Radhakund. And they may be taking birth again and again superficially. Some of the residents there, especially the animals, they may be taking birth because of offenses or sinful activities. So if you're a devotee, but you perform sinful activities, especially if you perform sinful activities in the Dham, you may take birth as an animal in the Dham. You get to stay in the Dham because you're attached to the Dham, but because you were sinful, you take birth as an animal. Some of the trees there are described in the Bhagavatam as having been impersonalists in their last life, who were not offensive, but they were impersonalists, and they're getting a chance to have some personal connection with Krishna. And some of the residents of Vrindavan are very, very great devotees who that this is their jumping off point, that this is their last birth in the material world. And they're coming there, like we also have this in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, that after having made many, many levels of advancement, that's there. And some of them are sadhus who appear in Vrindavan out of their own free will. They don't have to take birth, but they're coming there to Vrindavan so that they can help others. They can bring others to the essence of Vrindavan. So I think now it's time to greet the deities. So thank you very much. Anything bad in this presentation, please forgive me and ignore it. Anything good in this presentation is certainly from Srila Prabhupada, our acharyas, the Bhagavatam, and not from me. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhagavatam ki jai. Haribo Vrindasundari. Nice.
Her Grace Urmila Devi Dasi Prabhu Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Darshan time, cameras on, if you can, please. Jagannath Gopal, is that a peacock feather here?
Concede of our spiritual master, and the only way by which you can obtain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering. Krishna, my wish is that my conscience is purified by the word emanating from his lotus feet. Attached with his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes, fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, and by him ignorance is destroyed. Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. May your fame be spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter at your lotus feet.
Thank you, Jai Nitai Prabhu. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. All right, welcome to the Afterglow. Krishna Kumar, are you still there? Yeah. Yeah, wonderful question. Thank you for asking such a qualified speaker this question. We got a really good, thorough answer. Thank you, Krishna Kumari. I know one devotee. He was told that he was Vishnu Jan Swami in his previous life. This may or may not be true, but the devotee feels encouraged in his service by knowing that somehow or other. So, yeah, whatever happened in the past, if we made this connection with Krishna in this lifetime, everything, whatever happened in the past becomes auspicious. So this is how we travel back in time. We may have been a mess in the past, but if we are practicing bhakti in this life, then whatever has brought us here is auspicious. Thank you, Krishna, for bringing me to this point where I'm discussing your glories with the devotees. Jai. Would anyone like to speak, to reflect, or ask a question? Jagannath Gopal is here. I feel very confident we'll get good answers. Okay. Feeling introverted today, huh? Vasudev Prabhu is here. Would like to acknowledge Vasudev Prabhu. I was thinking of him. He's taking care of the deities, but at the same time, Radha Murlidhar is taking care of us all. So bhakti goes both ways. The rasa is very thick. It goes both ways. We may be taking care of Krishna, and Krishna is taking care of us. I hope I captured Vasudev Prabhu's sentiment right. He dresses the deities, then he goes out and looks at them as if he's seeing them for the first time. This is devotion. Thank you, Vasudev Prabhu, for your example. Okay, Jagannath Gopal. Oh, Krishna Kumari, there she is. You have something to add? Did you do a past life regression?
No,
You want to do it now?
I don't know what that means. I am trying to revisit my youthful Krishna consciousness. The Lower East Side does help me. yeah, when I go there, yeah. Anyway, I won't tell you what I was thinking about on the Lower East Side the other day when I was there seeing you, and we never got to hear from Venu Madhuri about. It's probably not a good time if she's working, but her her afterglow.
Yeah, that's Venu Madhuri's rasa. She's at work, but at the same time, she's hearing about Krishna.
If she can't share, I'm really fascinated. Maybe Jagannath Gopal Prabhu. I'm really fascinated by Dwarka present day, actually. Yeah, I mean, I love to watch those videos of what they find under the ocean. Yeah, and then like, I think, oh, what about the fish that live, in the castle now? So yeah, I'm interested in Dwarka present day. If anybody has any tidbits of like archeo excitement, Ross.
No, I'm sometimes I also get that bug. So I end up hearing some podcast about these archaeologists. Now, it is a widely known fact among archaeologists that Krishna was a person, his divinity aside. But everybody agrees, most of the people agree that Krishna was a real person, and they have many complicated ways to prove that, going back in astrology and whatnot. So yeah, it's very interesting, and there are certain differences of opinions among them, but all of them agree that Krishna was a person, and he was a very clever guy. He was a very clever guy. He knew how to, so to say, manipulate the political systems during his time. So yeah, he was he did exist as a person, and in Dwarka also, the current Dwarka, actually the Dwarka that Krishna lived in is actually in under the sea now, as you mentioned, but there are many surveys being done, and even the location is debatable among them, but it's quite true that Krishna did exist and Dwarka did exist as a kingdom and whatnot. So yeah, many archaeologists have worked on that, and so the thing is, we see Krishna as a divine person, as an all-loving person, but then often the world doesn't see him like that. The world sees him as a person shrouded in mystery, as a person, having so many unknowns and a very fascinating personality, which is to their credit, definitely. That will help them come to bhakti someday. But yeah, I guess that's all I had to say. So there is a very nice podcast, but I'll check if that's in English. Maybe I'll send it to you. It could be in Hindi, I don't remember. But that guy is really intelligent. That archaeologist in that podcast, he's really intelligent. He uses so many proofs, so many, and those seem very valid. He uses Shastra also, Madhvacharya's commentaries and whatnot. So yeah.
We should do a scuba diving parikrama around the castles of each queen of Dwarka for Krishna Kumari. Yeah. Krishna Chandra has his hand up.
I just wanted to say I find it very fascinating that between Dwarka and Ramasetu, we have the ocean has preserved these tirthas, and they're for a long time perhaps people weren't aware of them, but now they're here for us to really see that all everything is absolutely real. I mean, most of us, of course, don't need that confirmation, but it's really nice to have it as a bonus.
Krishna is real. That's what I hear from Krishna Chandra Prabhu. Thank you. Very nice point. Adipusha Prabhu, welcome. You're late. You have anything to add? Is Prabhupada inspiring you to say something? No? Hold on.
Fantastic class. I mean, she's on the PhD level. I'm on the kindergarten level. What can we possibly add? She's just pouring out wisdom and Shastra and, realization.
Thank you. Nice sweater, Adipurusha Prabhu.
I give to you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's see.
There's this one doctor that I really like. He's kind of cracking open all the lies we've been told, from allopathic stuff, which might be controversial. I won't talk about, but he always announces like where he went to high school, where he went to kindergarten, and how like everything is actually useless, So anyway, but in Urmila's case, she went to Prabhupada's lotus feet to learn. So have you, Adi Parush. So grateful that you had that association and that you're really giving us a taste of that. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. All right. Min, would you like to unmute yourself and say Hare Krishna to finish the yagya for today? Min?
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you.